On EarthMC, a lot of the driving force that keeps the server going is the politics and war. These two things are the way the EarthMC community continues to find interesting and fun things to do every day. They run governments and make claim agreements with bordering nations, making friends and enemies. One of the things that comes out of this aspect of the server is alliances. There are all kinds of alliances, defensive pacts, economic alliances, and many more. There's a certain type of alliance that I want to talk about today, and that's the Meganation. Before I talk about that though, make sure you do subscribe to the channel really quick. I was checking my analytics recently, and first of all, the subs have slowed down a ton, but second of all, I've seen that 75% of the people watching aren't subscribed. So I feel like I just need to push harder until you guys actually subscribe. It's actually super helpful to me, and it's super easy for you, and so it would actually just be super appreciated if you did subscribe. Because I know it's super easy, and growing the channel has always been what drives me to do YouTube. So if you wouldn't mind just subscribing, it would be really appreciated. So what is a meganation? Well, it's an extreme sort of alliance. With most alliances, each nation has their own government, military, and national freedom to do whatever. And the nation they're in is an alliance that just helps them out with that. It's really just a mutual agreement that you won't attack each other. But with meganations, it goes a lot farther and controls a lot more. So with most of them, there's one central government, and a president that leads all the nations in the alliance. Now, depending on how far the meganation wants to go, there can be individual senates and governments for each state. This is how it works with most meganations, because they need to be able to easily vote on matters that don't involve other nations in the alliance, and can just get over with it without bothering other members of the supernation. But sometimes you'll find meganations that just want to control everything, but sometimes you'll find meganations that really just control every nation in the Union. A lot of the time you'll find this when larger nations annex neighboring nations and foreign colonies, because those smaller annexed nations just aren't large enough to properly run a government, so the central supernation government just completely controls over them. So now I've told you what a meganation is. But even though you now know what they are, it doesn't mean you have any idea why they are created. I mean, why would you give away freedom that is given to you when you own a nation over to a central government so that the nation controls matters going on in your nation? Well, that's a fair point, and something everyone has to think about before becoming a part of a meganation. But I've been a part of too many meganations to count, so it's safe to say I've went over this with myself and decided it was worth it. Because meganations are actually super fun. They're a great way to communicate with friends in different nations and stay in contact in situations you wouldn't usually. For most of the meganations I've been a part of, they start with a group chat created with several nation owners. One player will give their meganation proposal to the group, and everyone will mutually decide that it sounds fun and agree. From there, it usually takes a week or so for it to become reality, with names needed, national agreements needed, and a government system needed. The government system is an important part of this, and I'll talk about it in detail later on in the video. But for now, you need to know it's important, and it takes many days to set up. A lot of the time, it's not even set up by the time the meganation is started, and members will have to go by a temporary constitution until the full version is created at a later date. It's definitely a lot of what happens with meganations, because that's the type of people who create meganations. The political systems that come out of meganations are just enjoyable for the type of people who create them. EarthMC has always been very desirable for political nerds because you can easily replicate it in Minecraft. Using supernations is incredibly easy to do this. You can create your own government in whatever way you want, and it just goes into motion. It's a really cool thing to see. Anyways, another main reason why people create and join meganations is for military protection. Declaring war on one nation is not very scary or intimidating, but when a nation is backed by upwards of 10 different nations in the area, people will be a lot more timid to declare war. This means that a lot of the time meganations will form in times of war, and you'll see more controversial nations joining and creating meganations. More peaceful and relaxed nations can sit back and relax when they play a server, but nations that are more controversial have to worry about what they'll do in the event of a war, and how to protect themselves from it. So they join a meganation in an effort to stop war, or at least be defended if it happens. This is also the main reason why you'll see a lot of smaller nations joining these alliances. It's super easy, and you can just sit back, relax, and grow your nation without caring or worrying about other nations messing with you. So, with joining a meganation, you get a lot of good, but you also get a lot of bad. This always has to be considered when deciding if you want to join a meganation. One of these issues is that meganations aren't always respected. A lot of the time, if you're in the wrong one, your reputation will be tarnished for a long time. This is very evident in the USA, an idea EarthMC has never been keen on. It's been tried many times by various nations on EarthMC, but whenever it springs up, every nation in the US just feels threatened by it. Because of the manifest destiny type thing, the idea of a United States of America basically sounds like they're going to try and take over every nation in the US to do this. Most of the time that's not the case, but I totally get why someone would feel threatened by this. So small nations joining the USA sometimes gets themselves into a war instead of staying out of one. This sadly happens with a lot of meganations. When there are so many different people people all as one, all with equal chances to start a war, the likelihood gets higher and higher. So a small nation will join so that they don't have to worry about defense, and then a week later they're dragged into a war that has literally nothing to do with them. Along with this, a lot of the time meganations are not good at helping their smaller nations, and end up ignoring the problems going on in nations with smaller populations, just because they don't feel like they're important to the meganation, just because they don't feel like they're important to the whole group. Neglection happens a lot in meganations, and usually it stems from corruption in the higher-ups. Another very real problem that ends up happening in almost every single one. Most of the time, it's how it ends up dying. The public figures out that the higher-ups are in it for their own personal gain, and they're just done. Then every nation figures out about it, and suddenly there's only a few countries left in the meganation, basically meaning it has ended. And that's another problem that goes along with them. As a whole, they're just very unstable. They aren't known to last insanely long, and most of the time when something bad happens, every nation will just immediately leave, and everything will be dead over the course of just a few hours. It's always how it ends. This leaves nations with no defense or protection because their alliance just died. You can go from the top of the world to completely defenseless and vulnerable over the course of 24 hours. It's crazy how quick things can go downhill. This happens a lot during or right after elections. When a new power gets a hold of a meganation, if a lot of the population isn't a fan, they'll just straight up leave, and the nation will die because their candidate didn't win. Politics always have a large effect on meganations, because that's how they run. It's a gift and a curse. As I stated before, politics play a massive role in meganations. It's an integral part of almost every single one. So I wanted to go through a few different types of political systems from various meganations I've come across over the past few years playing on the server. So let's start with the one I'm most familiar with, a simple democracy. Obviously, you've all heard of a democracy. There's a president who's voted in by the people, and then a parliament or a house of representatives where bills and laws are voted on. This is quite simple and easy to run and create. It's also a very enjoyable type of meganation, especially for political nerds who enjoy creating this kind of stuff. This is going to be where you get hardcore politicians DM campaigning to win elections. And with the amount of seriousness that people have in the democratic system, it also comes with a major con, which is fighting and arguing. This is absolutely the main weakness of a democracy. There's a constant fight going on between political opponents, arguing over literally anything at any given time. This results in a lot of tension and instability, and slowly tears the meganation apart. Because of this, most democratic supernations don't last for more than a few months. Usually if you can get past the first 4 or 5 months, you're in the clear. Places like Cascadia have run with the democratic system for over a year now, with no major problems and no collapse. They've done quite well. The next system I want to talk about is the other extreme, this being a dictatorship. There's one ruler who basically runs everything going on in the supernation. You'll see this more when there's one larger nation and a bunch of smaller nations, because when only one of the nations matter, they end up getting the say in everything, and in turn get power to rule over everything going on. Dictatorships usually come with more warmongering nations, and also more powerful nations. My experience with these authoritarian meganations has never been very good, but one thing is for sure, they can keep stable for long periods of time. If you're looking to rule over an area for a year or more, a dictatorship can do that for you, because everyone joining is already okay with the fact that it's a dictatorship. So that gets rid of political instability. Basically, people know what they're getting into, and everyone thinks the same. The last one I want to talk about is constitutional monarchy. This is a good in-between, where there's one ruler of the meganation, but with a parliament to run under them. It's very common, and it works relatively well. It's a nice middle ground between all-out dictatorship and democracy. Constitutional monarchy can either get the best of both worlds or the worst of both worlds. Completely depends on how they're run and by who. If you know what you're doing, you can make it work. If you don't, it won't work. But that's going to do it for this video. That's all I have to talk about meganations. Comment down below if you have anything else to talk about, because I'm always interested in like more stuff to learn about meganations, and if there's enough to make another video, maybe I will. Thank you all very much for watching. Guys, I hope you enjoyed it. Toothbrush.